I'm Richard Taylor. It's the 5th of June 2018 and I'm here on Milton Road in North Cambridge. This is the road that I live on. Now, central government has put an awful lot of investment into the city of Cambridge, particularly into the city's transport. And our local councillors have decided to put £23 million of that investment into remodelling this road. And that's a lot of money. That's enough money to completely remodel it, to strip everything out and to start again. And I'm out tonight to go to a meeting organised by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, the organisation responsible for the City Deal investment, as it's called, in the city, and to see the latest plans for the remodelling of the road. The plans have been, I'm here to see them discussed and to see questions on them be put by the public and by all our local councillors. And I've seen the plans. The plans have been published, well, to an extent, online about a week or so ago. And there are some things missing. Important things that are missing include details, for example, of the traffic lights. One of the proposals is to put traffic lights on the roundabout that I'm standing on at the moment. We haven't got details of exactly how those lights would operate. We also don't have details on the expected impact of the changes. So what I'd like to see, what I would expect to see, is details on how the traffic flows are going to be impacted by the changes and on how people's safety is going to be impacted by the changes. So I want to see the traffic flow assessment, traffic flow modelling, and I want to see the safety impact assessments, both of which we've been promised and they haven't been published as yet. So I think we need to see those in order to make an informed comment on the plans that have been produced. Some of the problems with the plans, one is this roundabout. So the plan is to keep this roundabout and put traffic lights on it to create some crossings for cyclists. And the plan is to keep all the current entrances, including the entrance to Highworth Avenue, on the roundabout open. So I think that you could probably do better than that. You could probably do better in terms of cyclist and pedestrian safety by doing a different design of a junction, perhaps like the one that's proposed for the King's Hedges Road, Green End Road, Milton Road junction. There are some great things about the proposals. Now, in comparison to what we see when roads elsewhere in the city have been done, what's proposed here is much better because we've got very long lengths of cyclists and pedestrians being segregated from motor traffic by trees and verges. And that's something that I've been campaigning for right from the beginning, and that's in the plans. However, those lanes, those properly segregated lanes, are not entirely continuous, and I would like to see more work done to get them entirely continuous and to improve the areas which are not yet as good as they could be. And of course, we also need to work on junctions. It's not just good enough to have a safe place to walk and cycle down the long lengths of road, but you've got to be able to get across the junction safely as well. So that's why I'm so keen, particularly, to get the design of this roundabout right. I'm also concerned about the proposals to have a lot of the pavements in the area as shared use pavements. Now, these cause huge problems, or huge concerns at least, around the city, where people complain about cyclists cycling on the pavement, and people who are walking, particularly vulnerable people, often feel really concerned and worried that they're going to get run into by cyclists. Now, I think that the concerns are, or the reason that these things are in the plans is to make cycling to school safer. Now, my view is that ideally we should be treating pedestrians as the most important, the first thing we've got to get right in any kind of highway design. Everyone's a pedestrian sometimes, the most vulnerable people in our society are pedestrians. So we've got to make a system that prioritises them. Now, when it comes to people cycling to school, I think ideally people of all ages should be able to cycle on the mainstream infrastructure. The mainstream infrastructure should be built so well that anyone can use it, sort of from the age of 4 or 5 all the way up to 80, 90, 100. So that's what I'd like to see. I do understand, and also I think we need to think more broadly about the issue that's being addressed, which is how can people get to school without crossing main roads. So I'd like to see a lot more paths and cut-throughs in the area which enable people to have routes to walk and cycle through, particularly to and from school, without going near the main roads at all. But I am concerned about allowing cyclists to use the pavements, because I'm concerned about the impact that will have on people who have no choice but to walk. I'm also concerned about some of the new infrastructure on the road, new bus stop positioning. Will it impact traffic flow? Will it where we've got lots of new infrastructure on the roads, like crossings as well, and they're put together? Have we got too many sort of complicating and confusing factors that might make the road more dangerous? I'm also concerned that, or disappointed really, that the shop forecourts aren't being brought into the scheme currently. Now they are private land. However, you would have thought that the councils would be able to negotiate with the landowners, and if they fail to negotiate, of course, you've always got compulsory purchases at a very last resort. But I would have thought that we could negotiate something which is good for the general public and good for the shop owners and the landowners, so that we can perhaps bring in more trees and safer cycling and a better arrangement, even including for drivers who want to drive drive to the shops here, and for their own deliveries on Abbey Road. So we should be able to address that. I think I'm concerned that councillors sometimes don't tackle the difficult issues. So things like the shop forecourts and the junctions perhaps don't really get the attention that they deserve and the care that they deserve on a project like this. Anyway, I'm off to the meeting to find out what's going on. I think it's something that I can do sort of positively. Someone who lives in the area, I feel I've got a bit of a duty. I currently live in the area. These changes are going to impact the area for many, many years to come. And I feel I should get involved in the deliberations, and particularly I'm going to go along and film and tweet so I can bring what happens to those people who are not able to go out to a meeting. Now, councillors have set up tonight's meeting as a forum meeting. I think they're trying to sidestep the laws on public access to formal council meetings, although all our councillors have been invited to this meeting and presumably will be sitting at the top table at this meeting. I don't have the same rights to report this meeting as I would have at a formal council meeting, although I've had no problems to date at this particular type of meeting, although there have been many meetings on this project which have been held behind closed doors I haven't been able to get into, or indeed as was one that I was thrown out of. So I think it's disappointing that councillors are not really opening up the access, and it's not just to the meetings but it's also to the papers. If these were a formal council meeting, we'd have had proper papers a week ago, we'd had all the reports. So I've said some plans have been published, an agenda was published, but then it seems to have been changed through subsequent statements. So it's very confusing. We don't really know what's going on tonight. Now, in terms of my approach to filming, it's a private event essentially, although the public have been invited to it. So I don't know quite who's in charge, if it's a councillor in the chair who's going to be in charge, or if it's going to be a city deal officer, but whoever's sort of booked the room or in charge, if they tell me I can't film, can't report, then obviously I'll have to decide what to do. If I can't report, I'll probably leave. If I'm able to get something out of being there, then I will stay. My plan is to film everything that goes on. I see no reason not to film members of the public, particularly as many members of the public will be representing campaign groups, residents associations, and they'll be representing bodies generally in meetings like this, so I'm particularly interested to hear what they say, particularly if they're representing public bodies like the local schools. Like, one particular problem that we've had with this project is the input from the Milton Road Primary School, and we haven't been able to see that because some of that has taken place at behind closed doors workshops, which I think is appalling. And what I don't have an assurance of is that what's said at those meetings actually represents either what the parents at the school think, the pupils, the staff, the governing body, or whose views are really being put forward. I'm quite glad that I think some of the more extreme proposals from the school have been rejected, and we are actually keeping what I think is important. That's segregation of cyclists and pedestrians from the motor traffic with trees and verges, which I understand they wanted to get rid of for some stretches of the road. Anyway, I'm going to walk down now to the meeting. My plan is to keep the camera rolling, and I better get going so I'm there on time. And probably, I don't know what I'm going to do when it comes to the edit, but I might well just sort of speed this bit up.
Isn't it funny? There is a microphone. So I'd like to welcome everyone here to this meeting of the Local Liaison Forum for the Milton Road project, and say that we're very happy to have everybody here. Now, I'd like to introduce myself first and then ask each member of the Local Liaison Forum to introduce her or himself. And just to put people in the picture, The local liaison forum is made up of the county and city councillors for this whole Milton Road area. So that includes Kings Hedges, East and West Chesterton, and in terms of the county, Chesterton, Castle and Arbury. Because of the way that the boundaries are, all these wards and divisions cover the Milton Road project. So I'm Jocelyn Stutt, the chair of the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum, and I'm a county councillor for Arbury. And I'd like to hand over to Jerry Bird.
Hello, I'm Councillor Jerry Bird and I'm Councillor for East Chesterton and Vice Chair of the LLF.
I think perhaps if each person comes up to the
Should we all stand up straight away?
Good evening. I am Councillor Baitu Ditala, Councillor for East Chesterton Ward, and I'm a member.
Thank you, Beijing.
Good evening, I'm Liaison Stevie, County Councillor for Kings Hedges Division.
Can you hear me? Claire Richards, Castle Ward. That's how you...
You're Bruce.
And I'm Councillor in Kings Hedges, like a rock band, I suppose. I was with City Guild in the early days. So I've got some experience of it, and also we come to the meetings and workshops and so on, so I really enjoy it.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Damien Tutcliffe, Councillor for West Chesterton.
Jamie Yeo, newly elected as Councillor for West Chesterton.
What's a big change? Ian Manning, County Councillor for Chesterton.
Maureen May, standing for Charles at Milton Road Residents Association.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I'm Michael Page, Chair of the House Park Estate Residents Association.
Mike Sargent, City Councillor for West Chesterton.
Michael Bond, Old Chesterton Residents Association and Chesterton Community Association.
Thank you. And we have an apology from Councillor Carla McQueen, who's Councillor for East Chesterton. She may be able to come, but as it's now 7, and she did say she might be late or unable to come due to another commitment. So thank you. Right, well now what we're going to do this evening, rather than have presentations that are lengthy, is hand it over to all of you as the residents of this area to comment on and ask questions about the project as it is in this form. Now I do emphasise, and this will be emphasised by the officers who will introduce themselves when I hand over the microphone to them, that what is coming up today will go to the Assembly and then to the Greater Cambridge Partnership Board, and then if they approve, it will come out to us all for a formal consultation. So by no means is this set in concrete that's coming up today, but it is a project concept that has arisen out of all the workshops and discussions that we've had. Councillor Martin Smart referred to being here at meetings and workshops, and I know that so many of all of us have been involved in that way. So this concept has actually come out of what we all, residents, councillors, members of the LLF and residents associations have actually said, and sometimes, I have to say, demanded, and sometimes represented with placards up on the Milton Road a long, long time ago. And we have come a long, long way in terms of making sure that this project will be a good project for Milton Road, for the roads surrounding and for all of us who live in this area. And now, it also, of course, impacts on people who live outside this area, and therefore I recall that Councillor Anna Bradman is also a member of the LLF. She represents Milton area. She's a district councillor out there, and she's also a county councillor, and we co-opted her to the board a long time ago now because of this need to have somebody who would put a perspective from outside, because it matters to them out there as it does to us here. So, before handing over to the officers, or perhaps I should ask you to introduce yourselves first.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So I'm Paul van der Hoek, Project Manager for the scheme for both Milton Road and Easton Road.
And my name's Milton. I work for WSP as a consultant, so advising on the scheme. I'm project management on the consultant side.
Okay. Thanks, Jocelyn. Just to add a couple of points to what Jocelyn was just saying, I've got the slide here, which sets out a couple of key dates. So for the joint assembly, there's a chance to submit questions, and the deadline for that is on the 11th of June. And the last date for the questions to the Executive Board is on the 29th of June. And where are those questions?
To democratic services.
Okay, so the questions need to be submitted to Democratic Services in South County, which you can find on the website, or you can ask one of us how to do that later on. Okay, so in terms of, we've got the Joint Assembly Executive Board, then in August the programme will involve quite a lot of consultation preparation, consultation in the autumn when everybody can have their say on the scheme, and then we need to analyse the consultation results and put the final preliminary design together, so that can go to the board in hopefully March 2019, around that time. I think that's all I need to say. So I'm going to hand back to Jocelyn now, and we will go through questions and answers.
Thank you, Paul. I ought to have said too a thank you to Councillor Peter Saris, who is no longer on the LLF because he stood down, and a thank you to Councillor Hassan Austin, who also stood down at the last election, and they both were members of the LLF and contributed to the discussions and the questions and our input and output, so thank you to them. And also, I would just like to, we've got copies of the minutes of the last meeting of the Local Liaison Forum, which was held on Tuesday, the 30th of January 2018, and they have been distributed. There are copies here, and so I'd just like an agreement, if we will all agree, of the members of the Local Liaison Forum to accept the minutes from the 30th of January. Do I take it that people accept those minutes? Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thank you. Good. And now we pass on to questions. This will, as I said, be a question and answer session, and it's important that we actually focus on the concept and the various aspects of the concept that will be looked at in terms of the length of Milton Road. But initially, there are some questions that were put by residents, and I would like to put those questions first and to have a response from Paul or Neil, or we've also got present, I should have actually introduced the other officers that are here. We've got Andrew Walker, the Communications Officer, Leslie Hoyle here taking notes, and I know I should.
My name is Arthur Maleki. I'm working for WSP. I'm highway engineer giving support to you.
Thank you very much.
I'm having trouble hearing lots of people, so maybe in this meeting, could everyone make a real effort to speak clearly and quite slowly and project well, otherwise we'll be confused.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we'll do that. Now the first question is this, and it's come from Ricky McDonald. At several meetings I have attended, I have requested pedestrian refuges in the middle of Milton Road as many pedestrians cross Milton Road rather than walking along it. This suggestion has always been greeted positively by officers and councillors. However, I have yet to see any refuges on the plans. For example, pedestrians often cross Milton Road between the footpath at the end of Mulberry Close and Oak Tree Avenue, and between the end of Hurst Park Avenue and Chestnut Grove. There is an unnamed footpath there. I am sure there are other crossings north of the Union Lane Arbury Road junction, as pedestrians are usually walking to the Riverside and Commons, to the Grafton Centre or to the railway station or to the commercial city centre. The quickest and pleasant routes would be along Milton Road. Therefore, the question is, what is being done about this in terms of the concept?
Hi guys, is everyone able to hear me okay? Yes. I think it's a bit of echo from me, so I'll try to keep it at a reasonable distance. So I think in answering this, I'll look at it kind of in a wider sense, looking at crossings generally and where we put crossings and where we haven't necessarily put crossings. When we look at the crossings, we need to do an assessment of the locality in which we're putting it. If it's a signals crossing, lots of signals crossings obviously would slow traffic at each time there is a crossing. There's knock-on effects then in terms of the speed of traffic travelling along. If traffic is stop-start, there's more air pollution. And so the continuity of people travelling on Milton Road, we need to have a balance across that. So when we look at a crossing each of these locations that have been identified by the LLF, for example, we've tried to accommodate where we can, but we've had to go through a kind of a process of assessment. So first of all, it's kind of looking at we know that there's quite a lot of uses that are needed at each section of this road, and we've tried to hopefully strike a balance as best we can between all those, sometimes competing uses, between walking, cycling, public transport and road vehicles on here. So we need to make a balance in this locality. We need to look at where other crossings are and how far away they might be. It's very easy to identify lots of locations in which we need crossings, but if it's if traffic's having to stop each time, or a bus has to keep stopping at a crossing, it's not really progressing down the road. And so we have to look at what's the demand going to be for that crossing. So is there a strong enough demand to justify a crossing at that location? We have some guidance that kind of indicates set rules in terms of when a crossing, how near a crossing can be to a side road, which we need to bear in mind when we're looking at the design. And we also have to look at what is sometimes called crossability. So it's a kind of formula that's used to identify the kind of level of demand of whether a crossing can be justified at that location, and that's looking at the volume of traffic versus the level of use of pedestrians, the speed of the traffic. It's called pedestrian traffic volume rates that we use, PV squared formula, that we will look at in technical terms, and that's what so we have some guidance there that gives us a technical description of where we can put the crossings. We'd also look at the accident record. Is there a record of accidents being at this location from people crossing? And does it therefore self-justify? When we go to something particularly with a signal crossing, we'll get, and we have been, challenged by the signals team in Cambridge and County Council, right beside the officers, to justify why additional crossing is needed at that location because of the issues of stop-start traffic, cost of maintenance, linking it with other signals at the junctions to make sure you have continuous flow through. There's all those elements that need to be considered. The other thing to consider, particularly with Milton Road, is within the design, generally what's happening is the roadway is narrowing. So we're reducing it to about 3 metres per lane of vehicle traffic. So in a lot of these locations, we're already improving it by making it a lot smaller distance for people to have to cross. So where there isn't a designated crossing in some of the locations, ideally there's usually, in most locations, a crossing within 100 metres to get to, or you've only got a small distance to actually cross the road. Outside of the peak, as lots of people have told us as we've gone through this process, Milton Road often has periods where it's not so busy. So outside of the peak, crossing the road isn't necessarily a difficulty for people. And in the peak, obviously, we've got issues where we've got congestion. So again, what we can't do is, there's lots of areas where people have identified where they'd like additional crossings. We've gone through an assessment process to look at those and rationalise them. But what we've come to is trying to get a balance between the guidance we have to work within and the deliverability. If we're going to go look particularly at things like the refuges, when we do that, we have to taper to that refuge. So although it might be signalled, so 60 metres either side of that refuge, we have to taper back to give the visibility. That means we're losing verge in that 60 metres, we're using other facilities.
Is the Cambridge Remodelling Campus from 7?
Right, I can do it to music. I've not booked the hall.
Well, we have it booked as a permanent arrangement.
Over to... If maybe we could have a chat with the lady and gentleman just there. Didn't look directly, but those two. So on that note, I'll move on to maybe the next question, if that's right. So it seems very often there.
Yes,
I am ready. So it was my question.
yeah.
It's not about crossings, it's about refuges. If you look at Chesterton, road parallel Chester Road, there are 5 refuges along the same stretch. There are none along Milton Road. So it's just a refuge, not a crossing.
I guess what I'm saying is, even for a refuge, we have to assess it in the same way we would a more signalised crossing. It's the same process we have to go through. I know you're saying, and I know it's just a refuge, but that's taking up valuable width in those locations, which we have to then take it back from. We have looked at those as options, but we've rationalised it. We feel that the crossings that are currently there in the scheme cover the demands that are the main core demands and justify their locations as they are at the moment. There's not to say it's completely fixed, and obviously this is going to public consultation, as Jocelyn said, but we have looked, it's not that we've ignored that request, we have looked into it, but we feel where the crossings are can be justified with the processes we need to go through.
Thank you, and as has been said, we emphasise in the consultation people, of course, can make whatever suggestions they wish to make in terms of the concept as it currently stands. Now, the second question also actually raises the issue of crossings, but this is more directed towards cyclists. And this question comes from Nick Flynn. How do you expect cyclists to make the right turn from Westbrook Place to Milton Road, or from Milton Road southbound cycle lane into Westbrook Place? Why was this crossing omitted? And was any assessment made of the number of cyclists using this junction and how they would be affected by the lack of safe access to the southbound cycle lane from Westbrook Place? Please note that Westbrook Place is the only access point to the Westbrook Centre, which is the large office block down to my right, down the road there, and over 100 homes on Lily White Drive, which was the football field. Can the plans be amended to include some sort of crossing? And Nick Flynn kindly provided a diagram to show the position that he believed would be an appropriate position for such a crossing.
So in terms of Westbrook Place, so we did look at this option and try to explain some of the process we go through in terms of assessing crossing. In this specific location, you've actually got 100 metres in one direction, you've got crossing at Gilbert Road, and towards Richmond Fordham, which is about 70 metres away, you've got another crossing. So in both quite close localities to this location, you've got the ability to cross. If obviously, in terms of there's a lot of movement along Milton Road that are occurring, it's difficult to give a direct segregation for all those movements. What I'd say is we've prioritised north-south movements in general with the scheme. It's about people moving along Milton Road. We haven't made any other movements any worse than they currently are. So we've tried This scheme is trying to solve a lot of different issues here, so we don't feel we've made any other movements any worse, but we have improved things where we can. We have looked at the number of cyclists using the junction. There's been obviously a safety audit that's been undertaken, a stage 1 safety audit that's been undertaken by the council. There was no record of accidents in this location, which is another element we need to look at for justifying another crossing. The level of demand on, so if we look at the Gilbert Road and Mitcham's Corner, in the 12-hour survey that was conducted, there was about 107 crossings over that, of which 40 were kind of out of the peak. So it's not a huge amount that are undertaking those crossings at the moment, which really doesn't give an indication that we're crossing so close to this one to give an extra crossing at this location. And could it be amended in the future? As I say, this will go to consultation. It's certainly not out of the question, but we have discussed it with the signals team, and they don't feel there's the justification here to put an additional crossing at this location. But as I say, we'll be going to consultation, so views can be obviously expressed at a greater level.
Thank you. Now, your hand up there, yes.
Yes, so that's my question.
Right.
Just a few follow-ups on that. You said you had assessed the number of cyclists using that junction. How many was that?
So what we've got is the number of cyclists using the current crossings to give an indication of how many are crossing at the moment. So that's the Mitcham's Corner crossing and the Gilbert Road crossing. In 12-hour survey, there's 107.
Okay, so this afternoon I went to visit the Westbrook Centre cycle park in the offices. I counted a couple of 100 cycles parked there. All of them would have had to use this junction to access the Westbrook Centre. That's not counting any of the residents, including myself and my wife, who cycle commute every day using that junction. And you also mentioned the crossing at Mitcham's Corner.
Yep.
But to get there, you need to cycle along the pavement, which in fact my wife does because she can't make the right turn. She's not confident enough to make the right turn at the moment. But you're making that pavement significantly narrower in the plans. So do you expect cyclists to use the pavement to get to Mitcham's Corner?
We've provided separate, all along Mitcham's Corner, there's segregated roads. We've tried to do that segregation.
It's on the opposite side of the road. You need to cross a cycle lane, 2 general traffic lanes, a bus lane, and a bus stop. How are you supposed to get over the bus stop?
Well, the bus stops are really floating bus stops, so you have an ability to pass around the bus stop.
You're not on the opposite side of the road.
People are crossing over and undertaking that movement at the moment, and there isn't an accident record of it occurring, so therefore, is there a safety issue that needs to be addressed when that's not the issue at the moment? We're narrowing the road, so it's less distance to cross. You can then access onto the segregated cycle lane that's on the side. It's only a Cambridge curve, it's not something that will be difficult to manoeuvre over.
Directly opposite the junction, you put a bus stop. So to get to the cycle lane, I need to go over the top of that bus stop.
Well, you can undertake the movement and then past the bus stop, you could then enter onto the bus lane, through the bus lane and then onto the cycleway.
Can I see you afterwards and show me the plans and see describe to me?
Well, yeah, the plans are behind you. I'm more than happy.
I've looked at the plans and there's no way of doing that safely and conveniently. How many journeys would you want to inconvenience to make it possible in order to save a few seconds by not having a crossing?
There has to be sufficient demand, and we don't believe there's sufficient demand at the moment to justify another crossing at that location. I mean, should we have this discussion afterwards rather than back and forth at this point?
I hate to suggest it, but as a cyclist, I quite often have come down Trumpeton Road, and I actually alight from my cycle when I'm crossing the Linsfield Road crossing, and I really have to say that when I get off my bicycle and walk, it doesn't take me terribly long to walk as a pedestrian across the crosswalk there. And I think we do need to think about the fact that there are multiple ways that we can get from here to there, even when we've got a bicycle. But can we just move on? And Neil's offered to have a further discussion on that. I'll move on to the next question, which is Richard Taylor asks, when are the promised safety audits to be published? May we see a comparison of the existing situation in contradistinction or versus what's currently proposed for the entire scheme and each junction or notable feature. For the Elizabeth Way roundabout, may we have the safety audit for the alternative options also?
I think we've managed to keep the ball, so that's okay. I'm not sure what happened there. I think we've still double booked it to us and the...
Can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm not saying anything's relevant. So, in terms of the safety audit, so in answer to the question, the stage 1 safety audit was undertaken on the final concept, as we stated before, and the consultants WSP have obviously considered the various points raised in terms of reaching this preferred design, which we've got up on the walls at the back, and also which I've got on my laptop, so we can, when any questions come in, I can flick through various elements, aspects of the design as needed. So the consultants and I am confident that the correct safety considerations have been taken and action relative to this stage of the design. So the safety audit is an ongoing process. So this was stage 1. It's kind of a fairly broad sweep. Safety officers obviously consider aspects of the scheme. It was done on the final concept, which was an early iteration of the scheme. And we haven't actually yet formally replied to the safety audit. Now that we've got to this stage, we'll begin to think about our formal reply to the audit that we received, and some of that reply, Neil may be able to go into the details of what that reply comprises of. So, should the current design be approved for the purpose of going out to consultation, then the plan is that following the consultation feedback being received and any changes that are required on the back of the feedback made, then a stage 2 safety audit will be undertaken as part of the detailed design process.
Thank you. Number 4 is a question from Michael Page, who's on the LLF and the chair of the Hurst Park Estate Residents Association. Driving and parking on verges of the newly remodelled Milton Road, we need to address this issue. Imagine we have an impressive new tree-lined gateway into Cambridge with high-quality footpaths, cycle paths and bus lanes, which is then marred by vehicles parking on and destroying the new grass verges. Rather than being reactive to this, once damage has been done and continues to be done, could the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the County Council be proactive by planning now to implement a TRO, that's a traffic regulation order, banning verge parking along the entire length of Milton Road? TROs can take and do take a long time to become approved and implemented, so it is important that this be planned for at the same time as the traffic regulation order, the TRO, for the main project. An additional disincentive to parking on verges could be by the use of low-growing hedge varieties rather than grass, and this is done in the Netherlands. Maintenance might also be less for low-growing hedges rather than grass verges which need to be cut more regularly. Could this option be explored?
Thanks, Justin. Thank you, Michael. So, yes, we've always been aware of this, and we want to try and stop the issue we have at the moment where the grass verges do get parked on and get carved up in wetter weather with tyres and vehicles coming on and off. To be honest, it's still an open discussion about how exactly this works through, but it is the incentive to decentralise any kind of parking. What we're thinking about is a potentially double height curbs to stop vehicles being able to enter onto footways and verges to be able to park. Bollards has been a suggestion, but I think that's going to look visually that great along the road, so we kind of dismissed that. But that's not to say it'll be something interesting to see what people's views are coming through the public consultation in different ways. In terms of a TRO, it's difficult to do that. TRO is basically on the road parking. People are coming off the road. I'm not sure there's that mechanism to use a TRO in that example. There is.
King's Hedges Road, Ramsey Square, Campkin Road have these already in place.
On the verges?
Yep, there are signs up saying you can't park on the road. And this being enforced.
Okay, well, that's correct to me then. So, I mean, there's no reason why we wouldn't want to use those same types, particularly if they're already being used in Cambridge. In other words, there's certainly nothing I can see that why the council wouldn't want to do that. The incentive of the scheme and what we've tried to do with the design is, so we've made, talking with the arborists and the landscape architects, where it's not 1.5 metres in verge, it's going to be trees within hard landscaping to stop this issue of cars being able to park on there and try and make use of it. The idea of the hedges, again, that's certainly an option to consider where we have in between, we've got the planting trees to stop people trying to park on the verges where it is wider. So I guess in answer, it's something to consider in the detailed design. It wouldn't necessarily affect the layout of the design at the moment, it's more the aesthetics of how we deter that parking, or keeping the look of it really more. So it's more the subtleties of the design which we'll get in details on, but it's certainly, I can guarantee that it's the incentive of the scheme to disallow that kind of parking, disincentivise it. And if TROs are being used elsewhere and being successful in that regard, I don't see why we wouldn't do that.
Thank you. I think that Councillor Price wanted to make a comment about the TROs and their use. Councillor Price is the chair of the Greater Cambridge Partnership Assembly.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Just to carry on from where Michael Page is exactly right. These have been used and are being used. We've been successful with them in King's Hedges. It is more of a disincentive. There are vehicles, you could use double curbs, there are vehicles that will get over those, people will get over those, but people won't park once they get some large fines for parking on the verges, which we found has worked in King's Hedges.
Thank you. Now, number 5 question. This comes from Councillor Ian Manning, who's a member of the Local Liaison Forum and Councillor for Chesterton, the County Division. How does the output from the Opportunity Areas Workshop input into this design? How has the Community Sounding Board inputted into these proposals? Has advice been sought from Dutch cycling experts and cycling experts from other European Union countries that have extensive use of Copenhagen junctions? Has that advice been sought into the design of the junctions, specifically to resolve issues ascribed to them of being unsafe? Perhaps in responding to this, we could also have a short recitation of what the Community Sounding Board is, because that's a new invention, and I think people will want to know what is this Community Sounding Board.
Debbie to answer the Community Sounding Board.
Hi, I'm Debbie Goodland. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for the GCP. So, as you may have seen from a recent news release, we have...
Please speak up.
Sorry. Speak up, sorry. So, I'm Debbie Goodland, the Community Engagement Manager for the GCP. The Sounding Board was set up really as a sort of a way to test a few things with some people who have been sort of actively interested in the GCP and things that we've been doing. It's really a group of different stakeholders who we can test a few things with. They come from various different places, resident groups, interest groups, representing sort of people who are interested in cycling, walking, equestrians, so all different backgrounds. And it's really just a group that we can test things with. These proposals have not been seen by them and they've had no input into them.
Can we ask who's on it?
We're not going to give specific names, but we've given groups on there. So if you want to have a look at who the groups are, you can have a look on the news release. I can send the page around later on.
And is that one representative per group?
Sorry?
One representative per group?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
And Paul, would you like to answer the question?
So in terms of the landscape, all of that work done is very valuable. We haven't yet incorporated it into this, into the design, because we're not at the stage really where we're at that detailed stage yet. So the work is there, it's done. I've been through it with the landscape architect that I'm currently working with. In the next phase, I'm looking for the landscape architect to actually draw up some kind of ideas and drawings that we can then discuss. And I think discussion about landscaping is one that needs to be done with the community, so it's kind of there to be done still. And Neil's going to answer the last question.
Yeah, thank you. So Ian's last question was, has advice been sought from Dutch or other EU countries that has extensive use of Copenhagen junctions, cycling experts in the design of junctions specifically to resolve issues described as being unsafe? So I guess a prime example of us using EU country expertise is one of our highway engineers, Arctic, is here today. He's European. And there is actually, I mean, joking aside, Arthur has worked in quite a few Copenhagen style crossings elsewhere. So he brings that expertise in terms of looking at us in terms of putting some schemes here. There's examples elsewhere in the UK which use the same concepts as a Copenhagen, so it's not an untested kind of model going forward in terms of its use. And obviously we have the safety audit that's occurred which looks at this. We have advice that's come back from that, and there will be another stage of that that goes into detail going forward. So it's getting that balance of trying to do something that was kind of requested by a lot of the LLF going forward of having this Copenhagen style crossings, and we're also trying to adapt them. We have to just be careful when we're obviously taking an example of looking elsewhere that we have to fit that within our highway code and our rules. So for in Holland, cyclists, there's a lot more punitive measures that will happen to you if you hit cyclists. You know, and people are aware of that and obviously treat cyclists with more respect. Isn't always the case in the UK per se, so we need to immediately adjust that and obviously set it within the context of where we have the design of the highway code and the design guidelines we have in the UK.
Thank you. Now, we've also, and Andrew has kindly picked up 10 questions from Twitter, but rather than go to them at this stage, it seems to me it's better to engage everybody in the discussion. And what has been planned is that this will be a themed discussion forum. So if people will ask their questions or make their comments in accordance with the theme with which we're dealing at the time. The first theme that we'll have for about 20 minutes is on walking and cycling. So are there any questions or issues that people would like to raise about this? Now I see two hands immediately, so if we have that hand there and this one here. I have been asked just to have one question at a time, but so let's have the first question here and then the second question, and an answer, a response, and then the second question. But if we find that we're not moving along as quickly as we should in order to get everybody in, we'll revert to the idea that we have 1, 2 or 3 questions and then a response. So, thank you.
You have marked on the drawings a parallel crossing at the bottom of Highworth Avenue. The markings are currently very unclear. Pedestrians and cyclists don't really know who has priority. I understand that it is cars that have priority, but very many near misses there. I live in Highworth Avenue. I wondered if you could tell me what is a parallel crossing, are there going to be lights associated with it, and who will have priority, and how will they know that they have priority?
Right, this is at the end of Highworth Avenue, there's a crossing marked, and our questioner is saying it's not really clear as to what the meaning of the markings are and what the significance is of this type of crossing. This is at the end of Highworth Avenue.
So yes, this is Elizabeth Way roundabout, and this is the crossing at the very top here onto Highwood Avenue. So that's a parallel zebra crossing, so it's not signalised because the flow is very low in terms of Highwood Avenue. So essentially it's the same as people likely have seen before in the zebra crossing. Obviously if someone's there and looking to cross, then the driver should be giving way to allow them to cross over. It should be treated, it won't be signalised, and it will be treated as you would a zebra crossing in that regard. Again, it's to try and, it's a low flow arm of this junction, and it's trying to give that priority to cyclists over a car. There's enough room there if a car's, say, coming down Milton Road and taking a left, that they've got an ability to wait if someone was crossing without impeding the flow onto the roundabout, so that's being considered as well as part of that.
And what about cyclist priority?
So the cyclists, again, it'd be treated as a parallel zebra, so effectively if the cyclist is crossing, then the car should be giving way to them. I guess if you take in general with that is, if someone's crossed that tactile or is even waiting to go, as most people know how they would treat a zebra crossing, it should be treated in the same way as that. It's a bit unusual to have a parallel, but it's not unheard of in the UK, and there are examples of that elsewhere. Again, we're trying to bring some elements that not are untested, but are maybe new to Cambridge in part of this design going forward.
Thank you. And then yes.
Yeah, I'm speaking from the point of view of cycling from the area of Woodhead Drive, Downhams Lane, College Fields, all around there, even Hawkins Road. There's a lot of cycle traffic through Downhams Lane, either directly to the shops, the library, the Milton Road Primary School, that direction. Also, there's a cycle route through, it's quite heavily used, through down Downhams Lane. It goes up out of town along Milton Road, across the Fraser Road through to Chesterton. Both those routes are quite reliant on the current bi-directional cycle lanes we have. And I believe in this general effort to prioritise motor traffic flow, we're going to lose the bi-directional cycle lane. So that means that we're now more reliant, particularly doing the zigzag across from Downhams Lane to Fraser Road, on making right turns from the main carriageways and doing cycle manoeuvres in with the traffic. And it was pointed out earlier on that the traffic lanes are going to be made narrower. It's actually very hard to do a right turn into Downhams Lane off the main traffic lane at the moment because of the narrowness of the traffic lanes, and that's going to become even harder. So we're losing quite a lot in cycle facilities in the interests of prioritising motor traffic. So isn't this contrary to what the Greater Cambridge Partnership remit was supposed to be? Although I'm obviously the consultant have stated that it's the traffic flow that's the priority. So why do we lose out as cyclists, particularly there? Particularly because there's no crossings being put in there.
I'm going to try and answer. I'm not sure if I've fully understood the exact question you've got.
It's quite important, that one.
So we have got shared surface on. So it's a shared on the northern side of the road. You've still got the shared, as well as a priority cycle lane going with the flow of traffic. You've got a shared surface as well. So you could go contraflow to that.
What's the width of the shared surface?
2.8 minimum on the shared surface. So you've got that ability to, so pedestrians, so you've got dedicated cycle lane for anything travelling in the direction of the traffic, and then if you contraflow the other way, you've got 2.8 metres to accommodate those cyclists who might be coming the other way, and also
so they'll be on the opposite, it will be continental, but cyclists will be going.
You've got two, effectively, you've got two-way at that point. Well, yeah, and on the opposite side, you've got a dedicated cycle lane as well. So you've always got double provision for people going contraflow or going inbound to the city.
But you're in conflict with the pedestrians, so there's quite a lot of cycle flow here. So with people.
Ideally, we want people to be on the right side, the correct side of the road, of the direction they're travelling in.
Well, yeah, that's my point. There are no crossings, and you're making a right turn more dangerous.
So
it's going to be hard.
This is a question that I particularly want answering in the consultation, because the shared use here is an element that needs some discussion still. So what we've tried to achieve here is an inbound and an outbound segregated cycleway, which we can only hope would be used by the majority of cyclists because it is the best provision for them. As a kind of consequence of looking at the bi-directional cycle path on the outbound side of the road along this length, we've come back to leaving that as shared use footpath, cycle path, to kind of facilitate the contraflow cyclists who are not on the other side of the road in the dedicated and good cycle path. The question is, should that be shared use? Should we actually make it as a just pedestrian-only cycle path? And kind of different people have a different view on this. Because one of the aspects is that children go to school along this side of the road. So if we make it cycle-only, pedestrian-only, the children would have to cross the road to get onto the dedicated cycleway. So it's better to leave it shared use and hope that actually the majority of the competent cyclists are actually using the good provision on the right side of the road.
I'm a very, very confident cyclist. I've been cycling for 30 years, and I have a lot of trouble crossing the road there. It takes a very long time. And what Josephine said about crossing Trumpington Road, I think we should consider crossing Milton Road, because in the morning it takes a very long time to cross when there's no crossings. So just because I'm confident doesn't mean a truck's not going to knock me down trying to cross.
So, in terms of your question, are you saying that you would like to see more actual signalised crossings along here?
What I'm saying is that we need either crossings to access the correct cycle lane, or we need bi-directional. It's one or the other can fulfil the same purpose.
You've got both. You've got bi-directional and unidirectional in both directions.
No, because, well, okay, if you don't mind cycling into the pedestrians and things like that. It's a single directional cycle lane and then a shared parking space.
Yeah. So you've got lots of choice.
Wait till it happens, and what you'll find is that people go the wrong way on the cycle lane. Some of them will pass on the left and some will pass on the right, because this scheme is encouraging cyclists to pass on the wrong side. So when a cyclist is coming towards you, your instinct is to go to the left, and this scheme is saying someone going south towards the shops is going to have to go down the pavement on the right. But because there's an existing bi-directional segregated lane, which we're losing, it's going to cause a lot of confusion, and I think it's a safety issue.
I think in the early days, some of your points are valid, and they're valid points, and they need to be answered in the consultation by, and we need to consider this fact, whether we do keep it as a
well, this was the Do Optimum campaign had a bi-directional lane. That was rejected, so
there's other issues. There's even more difficult issues of having a bi-directional lane there in terms of all the crossings, the side road crossings. So we have looked at that in detail, and we feel that this is a better option.
Right. Now, I can see that there are a lot of hands going up, so perhaps if this issue can certainly be raised in the consultation, but I see Barbara Taylor there. I think, did you have your hand up, Jamie?
It was on this matter, actually.
Oh,
but
I think, are all the hands coming up about this issue? Yes. Yeah. Well, good. Why don't we have the whole four who want to say something about this issue and then have a response? So, Barbara, if you would speak, then, I'm sorry, Nan, of course, that's right, and then Michael, and then Jamie. So we'll go have the four, and then we'll have a response, because it's all on the same point. Barbara.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, at the workshops and everything, we wanted a crossing there, particularly because it's a very long stretch between Arbury Road and Union Lane up to the next available crossing. And there's a lot of pedestrians, and a lot of people will come out of Woodhead Drive and have to stay there to cross over to go to the bus stop. So, our first priority is pedestrians. Right. So we really do need a crossing there.
Yeah, really, just the same thing, that I think that pedestrians should just be sort of swept to one side a little bit.
this. We all say it's a residential area, we want to keep it that way, we want to stop the road becoming a division between the two. So for pedestrians to be able to get across safely and up and down is very important. I'm very concerned about this shared space because cyclists always do what's easiest, and as we've just heard, some people would find difficulty, they say, with dedicated cycle lanes. Well, if they're just sort of mixing it up with the pedestrians, that's no good. And also, the less confident cyclists, the children, would probably be accompanied by their parents if they're going to say, I'm school on the road. So that's fair enough, they're with pedestrians. But I'm not very keen on the idea of cyclists just moving up and down in a shared space when they've got their dedicated lanes.
Yeah, I was actually basically coming around to the same conclusion with actually 2 dedicated cycle lanes on Milton Road. Cyclists really should have a social conscience and use them. In terms of the joint one, used as a particular concession, following people saying because all the shops and everything are on that side, many of the residents, it would be helpful if they could actually ride, and particularly if they've got children on bicycles, stay on the north side of the road. But if you are going to be worried about that, then I think the best solution would be to enforce the current law, which is cyclists should not be cycling on a pedestrian pavement.
I cycle this corner almost every day now because it goes to my house. And actually, looking at these plans, my biggest concern is for pedestrians. I think when you're looking at it, because what Michael's talking about is it would actually be impossible to impose because you're looking at shared usage anyway. My other concern is it is a bit chaotic around that time at the school, so a lot of cyclists will actually then, the very fast cyclists move onto the main road, they're looking at narrower lanes. One thing I'd like to go back to is I think the former meeting where the decision on this was explained. And it was mentioned that sort of a two-way cycle lane, the visibility for the car driving into town, they would struggle to see a bike coming the same direction. And that was sort of one of the justifications, so that there'd be a blind spot there which might cause a collision. That seemed like a justification, but then we've then gone back a stage where we're saying, no, we'll just put those bikes on the shared usage, which seems to rather contradict the original logic, and I would just like to understand, how we deal with that.
And then Martin, I think
Two quick questions, Chair, if I may. I'll put them back to you quickly. But they both relate to the cycle lanes being behind the trees and having a raised curve. So the first point is, do you feel that wheelchair users will be able to cross the road safely and as well as any other person? And secondly, do you feel that these, when we first started, we talked about designing a scheme for 2030. And do you feel that these cycle lanes are fit for purpose for 2030? And I say that on the basis they can have constrained size, they cannot be made bigger because the trees will be in the way. And there will be other users on that cycle lane, like electric bikes and anything else we can't even imagine right now in 2030.
did you want to?
It's a bit hard to, I think that all of the points made form valid points, and they form kind of aspects of the discussion that we need to have around this, and that I need to hear back in the consultation. So I don't really have a response to say to any of the points made, apart from they're all valid points.
No, I can answer in terms of the question around why we had a two-way cycle lane and the blind spot and justification for using that as an issue for us. It comes down to the Copenhagen style crossings. When we had a two-way, if we enable a dedicated two-way cycle lane on one side of the road, we really can't have the Copenhagen style crossings justification of that because of that issue of a driver having to consider a lot of different factors, including the blind spot. The difference in this design, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, but it's a shared surface, you can go contraflow and you've got Copenhagen's. The difference, and I'm afraid this is too zoomed out to see, but if you ever look at the plans at the back, you'll be able to see, is that if you are contraflow and you get to one of these, you need to give way. So there's clear give way markings. So to stop that issue of that blind spot for the driver, that you've got priority if you're going with the traffic on the dedicated cycle lane, but if you're coming the contraflow, then you have to give way to the car making the move. So that's the key difference of why we can have it in this design and we couldn't have it if we have a dedicated two lane. As Paul said, we've gone for another number of different ways of looking at this, and this is talking with the cycle team as well. This is the option that's come forward. There was a lot of feedback from the LLF originally about this particular section and wanting that ability to have a kind of either a two-way or a shared surface for the school traffic in the morning, and it is a big deal, and there's a lot of people using it. It's very different character between those peak periods and the off-peak periods. We've done an awful lot of work looking at these different options, and obviously a shared surface is what we've come up with as the best way to kind of accommodate as many of these movements as we can. But none of the solutions are perfect, and obviously, as Paul said, this is something that needs to come through in the consultation really in terms of what the wider decision, because we obviously work with the LLF, and I think with all of these, I think we're quite happy that we have tried to listen to the LLF that's come forward and what the ideas that come forward. I hope you can appreciate that the scheme has adapted hugely from what it was originally. So that, I know we're getting quite a few points which are probably elements that still need to be refined in some elements, but I think the scheme has moved a long way, and we are getting much closer to something we can all agree on. It works for as many people as possible, but ultimately, with all the different users and different points of view, it's trying to compromise and get that working together while still achieving the objectives of the scheme that was set out originally.
What about Barbara's point about the crossing, lack of a crossing? Because this is a crossing here.
It is, yeah, and I guess part of that is in having the shared surface and the contraflow is to enable people to undertake those movements to not necessarily need to cross to do that. In terms of crossing the road as well, although with the trees, as was pointed out, you've got a lot of drop curbs along here for all the access points, so it's not a continuous wall of trees that and verges you can't get through if you're trying to crossing. There's lots of opportunities to enter onto the cycleway, etc., as you're going along. But generally, the balance here is, rather than having lots of crossings on the section of the road, it's the ability that you can go onto those, so you can go the opposite.
No, I think we're talking about pedestrians. You need to get to the south side to get to the bus stop.
I don't know the exact distances, but I think it's Fraser Road, there's a crossing at that point, and Union Lane, there's a crossing at those elements. Again, we've kind of used that as a maximum sort of walking distance, and it's certainly within those ranges. But again, you know, this is something consultation. It very strongly comes across people want to crossing in this area, but we have other strengths in terms of justifying those crossings. Otherwise, you can imagine if we went with everyone's suggestion of where a crossing would be, you wouldn't really move along the road. You'd be just constantly at a crossing point. So it is. But if there's a particular area that comes across in the consultation, it's not that it couldn't happen, but we've got to get a balance really. I don't think.
Yeah, so the nearest crossings are Albury and Fraser.
Yeah, Albury and Fraser Road, sorry, the two nearest.
Thank you. I think we should move on to junction design, including interactions between pedestrians and cyclists, because this has arisen that if I could quickly come back to the point that I was making about Trumpington Road and Lensfield Road. See, that's a really dangerous intersection, and what I meant was I would cycle down in the cycle lane, and then there's no dual use on the footpath. But what I do is cycle down in the cycle lane, alight from my bicycle and act as a pedestrian on the path and walk up to where the crossing is. Now the crossing's not immediate when I get off my bicycle, but there is a crossing there. Now so in a way I'm supporting having a crossing somewhere that people can conveniently walk to, but we can't expect to have a crossing instantly, I'm going to cross the road. As I say, you can walk down to a crossing, but I do see the point here because the crossings are far more distant from each other than they are, for example, up at Mitchell's Corner. But to hand over to others now, are there questions or comments about, from the perspective of junction design, which includes interactions between pedestrians? Yes, so that people could look at the junction that's up here at the present time and ask some questions. Yeah, and this is where some questions have arisen about cycling, but perhaps over to you. Who would like to ask any questions about this Gilbert Road and Milton Road junction, particularly looking at the junction design and at interactions between pedestrians and cyclists? Any comments? Yes, Mark.
There are three areas there, top right, bottom right and possible left, which are shaded blue on drawings as shared use, where pedestrians and cyclists come to a parallel crossing. Where it's shaded blue or grey up there, is there going to be a change in colour of the surface? So if you've got a red cycleway, will the colour then change to indicate that it's shared use?
So yes, Michael, in those areas we would have a different change of surface. The plan is to work with disability groups to understand what's the best kind of surface to be using on that. Tactiles isn't necessarily always the best option to use, so that is something we need to gauge in the detailed design. I mean, the issue with this is whenever you've got a crossing point, obviously people are going to be waiting to cross, and that's trying to indicate there's potential conflict points, as we call them, in those areas. So yes, they will be clearly marked to make people aware that that's an area where they have to be more aware of pedestrian, and we're going to work with disability groups going forward to identify what best in terms of how that surface is marked.
Yes, Doris.
One point was made at a meeting that I think calls out about lights along the surface where you do have conflict between pedestrians waiting and cyclists coming along. And that seemed, I think it was Matthew Davies who told us that this was in effect somewhere has been used in other countries. And that would obviously be better than too much embedded in the
I mean, it's certainly a good idea. It's something that would get looked at. It would probably come down more to the county and kind of maintenance and issues around there, but it's certainly not something
yes,
that...
I'm just raising it so it doesn't...
Yeah, no, it's certainly... I can't see any issue in the idea. It's certainly a good idea that could be explored at the detailed design stage. Probably more, as I say, we have to talk kind of maintenance and other issues that come into the factor of, durability of that sort of feature, because the last thing we want is to put something in and it starts fading and it's not properly maintained and it's still expensive. So, yes, but certainly we success.
Yes, Hillary.
Is there a bus lane here? Because I've had problems looking at the plans to find where some of the bus lanes are, because at the moment there is one coming in.
So there's a bus lane, southbound bus lane leading up to this junction, and then there's a bus lane that starts just after the junction, but not actually through the junction.
So not through the junction,
No.
so it's not my imagination, there's no bus lane there,
No.
because there isn't. Okay. Right.
So any more questions about this intersection, or can we move on to the next, which is Ashland Road? Oh, Elizabeth Road, sorry. Oh, it's a proper intersection there. Yes. And we've saved the roundabout. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Because I'm so excited about the fact that the roundabout's there, that's all.
Yes,
sorry.
If we go back to the last slide.
Oh, back to Gilbert Road.
If you're coming up Milton Road and going down Gilbert Road, there is nothing actually to protect the cyclists so that the cars could actually cut you in the... Is there any reason why that's not there?
Sorry, if you're turning left up Gilbert Road, you're saying?
No, if you're coming Milton Road and going into...
Turning left into Gilbert Road?
Yeah, Gilbert Road, yeah.
Similarly, if you're coming down Gilbert Road and you want to go left up Milton Road, there's no protection for cyclists. Sorry.
But your own cycle there.
I think what this does, doesn't it, is send the cyclists coming out of Gilbert Road a shared use. Is that what it's saying, isn't it? What? Well, no, but I mean, it's a cycle. There's an indication for cyclists, because what I've experienced there is the cyclists do that already. And if you're standing at the lights, wanting to get across, the possibility is that a cyclist will be coming while you're standing at the lights, and that's why the issues were being raised about different colours and light, cat size and so on, which I think is quite wise at that.
Can I ask a question about the crossings? Presumably there will still be lights on this intersection,
Yes.
Will it include the accelerated cycle lanes for traffic going towards Milton?
Possibly.
Because it seems to be an ideal situation for reducing it.
Yeah, so with regards to this junction, what we've tried to do here is segregate the cycling and the pedestrians as much as possible. And this is kind of what it looks like if you do that. There have been other opinions expressed during our project team meetings. One way that we could approach this junction is, rather than segregate the cycle use and the pedestrians, is to make it a shared use environment. So that means taking away all of the red lines through the junction. Of course, then you have other problems in that the cycling and the cyclists and the pedestrians start mixing. So what is the best option? It's a really difficult question. In terms of the left turn into Gilbert Road, there isn't enough space to provide full segregation for the cyclists turning left there. So what we're looking to do, because the cyclists are already at carriageway level here, obviously they have to then swing round on that section of road. One of the things we have looked at is when we put the advanced green light to enable those cyclists to get around before the cars. Obviously that doesn't help if it's kind of mid-phase of the traffic lights, but it gives cyclists waiting at the junction an advantage, basically. So yeah, so in the phasing at the moment there is the 5-second advantage for cyclists.
So if we...
Any more discussion?
Hi, just a brief note, just to note that you're going up that road, there are a lot of schools, so it really does need to be prioritised from a safety side.
So what we
The cyclists going up that way.
Yeah, I think what we have to keep going back to is a lot of these manoeuvres are being undertaken at the moment, and we have got an accident record. It's very, and we have to use that to some extent because a lot of it otherwise is perceptions in terms of it. We can't cover off, as Paul said, in these junctions. We just don't have the room to segregate. And as some people have mentioned, there's that battle. How much do you give over when we're trying to segregate? How much goes to cyclists and how much goes to pedestrians? There's always going to be differing opinions over sort of where that should be. So we're just trying to, we've gone through a lot of iterations to try and get a balance between those. I'm afraid we can't protect every movement on every junction, but the rationale is a lot of these are being undertaken at the moment, and then we look at the safety audits and the safety record of accidents to see where there's a history, and if there isn't, then some of these manoeuvres are being undertaken at the moment and they're not resulting in issues. Yeah, that's also a good point that Paul's reminded me. There is an all green phase at this, so for pedestrians, so there's an ability to undertake those crossings as well. So all the traffic is shut off from cycling, and it moves pedestrians to move around this junction in the green phase. So that it's not that the pedestrians are being forgotten about. We are trying to get a balance between all these differing demands.
Is this a question about the Gilbert Road?
It's just a quick question about speed limits for cyclists, because as it is there, you can imagine someone who are late for work who are just careering along at 30 miles an hour because it's a designated cycle track, so that's what they think they can do. And whether there are segments where the cyclists have some warning that they've actually got to cycle at a slower speed to take into account their speeds. Because there are some people on cycles who, if they think they're on a cycle track, will just go for it. And whereas there are plenty of us who cycle along almost at the speed of a pedestrian.
It's an interesting point. We don't know the answer to that. And the other thing is how it will be enforced. And we also don't want to add too much signage clutter to the street. So it's a good point though. How do we make the cyclists aware that they're entering a zone where there may be interactions with pedestrians? And we are considering those kind of issues, and they're constantly raised when we speak with the cycling team. But in terms of the signage, I'll ask that question as well.
So we could move on to the next junction.
I guess the other point just on that one, Justin, is also in terms of the different types of cyclists, that's why, say for this example, we've got the air sails, those boxes on the road where you get an advantage for those that are going to stay on the road, generally those kind of commuter cyclists, and then we've got the segregation for those more sedate cyclists or less confident cyclists. So again, it's something that we're trying to balance, but we are aware there's different types of cyclists.
So, the Elizabeth Way roundabout with Elizabeth Road,
Elizabeth Way, Milton Road, and then Highworth Avenue. Yeah. Yes. Oh, sorry, Richard, and then yes.
Right, I think here in particular we need more information to be able to comment from an informed position. So I was disappointed that we're not going to have the safety audits published, but here I think we need them in particular. And also I think we need to know what the impact is of the proposed new traffic lights here on the flow of traffic, the throughput and the expected queue lengths, the kind of information we have had before on previous designs. But I think when we've got the consultation pack, I think updated information of that kind needs to be presented in relation to this junction and other junctions. And I suggested that perhaps we need to see this design and the alternative in the consultation so that we can compare them. I think it's possibly too soon to go straight to this one.
just a sec, Alex, did you have a question, or was it you?
Yes.
Yeah, and Alex, if you'd ask your question too.
Just to ask, you described how the cyclists cross on the northern arm of Highworth, but could you go into more detail about the cyclist crossing on Elizabeth Way? Because at the moment there's nothing there at all and it's very dangerous.
So we've got Richards and we've got Alex.
So in terms of, obviously, through this process, and as I think the Councillor Smart said, in terms of, he was at the very beginning, it's been a long process. We've gone through a lot of different options, so we're not going to be suggesting a consultation alternative. We've gone through a lot of analysis to get to this point, and there's lots of elements that are being considered to get to here. This flow of traffic through here is a big issue. Safety is obviously a concern. Giving priority to cyclists and pedestrians whilst maintaining the flow at this particular junction. Bus movements. There's lots of elements that have gone into there, and I'm afraid we're not going to go back on ourselves in terms of looking back at another option that's previously considered, because we've gone through that process to get to this point. In terms of the question around how you cross Elizabeth Way, essentially it's a signalised crossing at that point, so straight across. Yes, so you don't have it's not at the moment on some crossings where you've got a stage crossing straight across, and it'll be signalised for you to undertake that as you're travelling along. So it'll be a lot safer than the current situation. There is an accident record here, and that's what we try to do by trying to make as much segregation for the north-south movement as much as we can, so you don't have to get involved in the roundabout. You can avoid it as a cyclist. And I think we've done quite well to try and reflect the optimum schemes in what it envisaged for this roundabout as much as we can as a signalised roundabout.
So would cyclists and pedestrians cross at the same time?
Yes, they would.
So would there be a positive or negative impact on the flow, say turning left inbound from Milton Road onto Elizabeth Way? That's the kind of detail we don't have going into the consultation.
So in terms of whenever you make kind of dedicated, whenever you put in signals that optimise a junction, because it reduces hesitation by drivers that might be in a roundabout, you know when you're good to go, you know when you need to be stopping. But equally, when you're putting in additional crossings for pedestrian cyclists that aren't there at the moment, that requires another phase, so that creates potential delay. So it's balancing between those. We've got an objective here to maintain or could be a slight reduction on the current capacity, but we have had in-depth discussions with the signals team, who obviously their primary concern in a lot of cases to make sure that capacity is maintained. The last thing they want to do is see network failures around Cambridge and knock-on effects. So there has been a lot of more analysis that's gone on and in-depth with officers to make sure that they're happy with the detail that's going on. I'm not sure necessarily the benefit in releasing all those technical reports when it's being vetted by professionals on the council for the signals team, who are obviously there with that incentive in mind, really, to want to make sure that the capacity within this junction, within the design that's coming forward, and working with them, we feel that there is, and they've been quite keen on it.
We can certainly state some of the figures that have come out of the analysis there. that have already gone through the signals team.
Now I can see 3 hands here, there and here on this junction.
Neil, can you explain the rationale for having a shared service on the right-hand, bottom right-hand arm of the roundabouts rather than having a cycle path as you've got on all the other arms?
Right, and then, yes, please.
On the northern side there is already currently a real hazard. There's quite a sharp angle from the properties there you could see. Unless you're going to do a compulsory purchase, I have very nearly collided with bicycles coming in the opposite direction. Couldn't care less which way how that. It looks like that bit of cycle path is narrower than what is on the southern side. Is that necessary?
Right, and then right.
Well, I have a similar point I was going to ask. I think that property on that bridge point there is number 1 Highway.
Yes.
And if I was number 1 Highway, I'd be actually happy to voluntarily sell a small sliver of land to make that a much safer area. So why don't we approach number 1 Highway and obviously if they're prepared to sell a little piece of their land?
I mean, so generally, we've meant not to be looking to take any third-party land, so then we are under the restraint of the highway authority boundary. That's not to say that, someone particularly their approach, maybe they're more willing with the LMF approaching them to discuss it, and if they're, but we're committed to not having a scheme where we compulsory purchase. So if someone's willing to sell the land, then obviously, subject to what they're asking for, I guess, with the council, that would be something to. There is a pinch point. There are pinch points on the scheme. We are constrained by what's there and people's ownership, but we're not looking to take people's land as part of the design. The question about why it's a shared surface is similar in that in the bottom corner is because we don't have the width. It's narrow in that section, so so we're left with the same situation, which we, as Paul said, we've had that discussion all the way through. Do we make it a shared surface or do we segregate? We've decided to go with the segregation where we can, but where we can't, it's a shared surface.
But you don't need the grass verge around that corner. You haven't got it on the southern side. Why do you need it on the northern side?
It's yes, you've got a waiting. It's difficult on that corner because you've got a waiting point there where you've got people that are wanting to cross. So you've got to need a bit of a buffer there to enable people to stand and wait ready to cross for when they get their green light to cross. You've got to have an area to do that. We're just trying to balance it out with the best time we can with the constraints that are on the ground in the situation.
Michael, your point is a valid one and something that I could possibly look into about the land.
I mean, also another point to make is a talking for instance number 3 on here on the corner in terms of their access, which is that grey section just before Howard Avenue in terms of we've worked to try and maintain drive accesses there also, which is not ideal to try and come up with solutions. It's a tricky locality based on the history of it and what's there at the moment we're trying to work with.
So we're ready to move on to the next junction, which is Arbury Road and Union Lane, which again, remember, we kept Union Lane open. Sorry. Any questions or issues or comments to raise about this one? Why is this changed to yellow?
So you put it where the trees are, so I can't see where the people are walking. I can't see where the pedestrians are. Do you see where you've got 1 through B, and then you've got a pink bit, and then you've got the yellow bit on the outside where the corner is?
So the yellow bits on the outside in the corners are where pedestrians would have to cross so they can wait for the pedestrian crossing to turn green.
But you've got a cycle lane, and then you're saying they're still allowed to go where people are walking. Is that what you're saying?
Those are cycle lanes.
Sometimes half the road you've got your people on at the top, and then you've got a little bit. Where's the other bit from? I'm confused. You've already got cycle lanes, so why is there any double use?
Sorry, can you stand up so that we can actually, can you
Can you see the houses? Sorry, because I'm really confused where the pedestrians are.
You don't mind pressing the points, so the points, you don't mind blowing off the
There's still got a cycle lane, the cyclist. Where am I going to walk?
So purple area is the shared surface.
Why have they got a shared surface? I've got a cycle lane already.
This is a section in which we were asked to provide. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't clear because you've got this yellow bit.
So the yellow bit is where it is dedicated for just pedestrians, and this is just because we were trying to continue that change for school kids to get to school, and at this point it is tighter than we would like in this section. But yeah, sorry, I think with the colours being a bit not washed out on the actual plan to get the distinction.
So has everybody understood that when we look at 143B, below that there's a mauve colour, and that's shared use because this is accommodating the school children who are going to, towards Asham Road and Milton Road Primary School, etc., and the library, which we are waiting to have it back again. And then the red part is the cyclists, and the yellow bit is for pedestrians to stand on while they're waiting to cross, and so on. Is that right? Yes.
The other thing to point out, which is difficult to show, obviously when we're showing the scheme, we're just showing within the highway boundary, but those of you that know this area will know all this area is also kind of pavement. So in reality, you've got more space, but we can't show that because it's not in the, or we haven't shown it because it's not in the highway boundary. So it's not quite as tight as it would seem. There's more space to kind of wander around, but obviously that's in private ownership.
Now, I can see.
Being all pedestrian sequence.
Yes, there's going to be an all green pedestrian sequence.
Right, good. Now, Jerry, and then there's Paul, who I see, and then up the back there. Sorry, I can't see how far enough. So, could we have.
Okay, I'm sure you'll be able to hear me. It's the little crossings where people have got to cross over past the bicycles to get onto the main crossing of the road. How is there going to be some kind of light? Is there a slight incline for the bikes to slow them down? Right.
Okay.
Because that to me looks dangerous.
Right. Could we have Paul and then one at the back here?
This looks so much better than early proposals. I just want to congratulate the guys who produced this. I'm to ask for clarification on the issue of southbound Milton Road traffic being able to turn right into Arbury Road. As I read it, there's no prohibition. Could you just confirm?
Right. And then up the back here.
Just a quick question. The shared use bit on the northern side, just before you get to Arbury Road, how wide is that actually? It looks very narrow, but I can't see on the right dimensions there. So you can have how wide that actually is.
Jerry, it's a good point. It's an area we need to kind of have a discussion with this ministry to decide how best to address that, which is the best solution. We're aware that that's something we'll need to refine in the detailed design, so no hard and fast decisions. It's something we need to discuss and kind of work through the best way to resolve that. Right, that can't be. But that is an area we know we need to look at and see how best to mark
Will you
that.
contact me over?
Yeah, there's no problem, in terms of, sorry, next one was, thank you, sir, for your kind comments. Yes, there is no restrictions on any movements in this, and there's, in terms of there's enough room just about to have a waiting area if you're undertaking that road. Yes, the current restriction of no right turn to Union Lane is retained. Cool. And the last one, sorry. So we're talking again about this section? Yeah. So again, as we mentioned, there is additional land here that we're not showing because it's in private ownership, but it's not as narrow as it would seem just from this week. You've got an additional area here on this section of the road which you could walk in, but is in private ownership, so to speak.
So what is the actual width? That was just a question. Do you know?
1.5.
questioner was concerned about the right turn from Milton Road into our view. That is retained.
Yes.
Right turn from Milton Road into Arbury Road is retained.
And the other is on the right-hand side of Arbury Road, the hedge overflows so that what you're showing there as pedestrian pavement is actually only half that which is available because of the hedge that's
So all hedges that have overgrown well as part of the scheme be cut back as part of it to, well, I mean, they need to be maintained obviously in the future, but they will be cut back to the highway boundary because that's the only way, you know, space is valuable in all the sections that won't be held up by spaces that, you know, it's in your own private garden, it's your hedge, but if it's in the highway, it's going to be cut back to the highway, right?
Right, good. Next junction, please. The King's Hedges, the roundabout.
This will be the roundabout, that one. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes. Right, questions about the crossroads at King's Hedges?
It's a small detail, perhaps just an oversight, but in the four quadrants and for pedestrians to reach their crossings, there's some shared space missing or some access.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. It's an error when we overlaid the colours. It was missing. So we're not saying that you have to walk over the grass. Obviously, would be a dedicated path. It's just a property. So that's a formal error when we put in the colour onto the drawing.
Right, good. Now, I saw a hand here, and then a hand here somewhere. Yeah, yes.
Just a clarification, will this also have an always green phase for pedestrians?
Yes, it will. So, and it's quite, you've got a fair, you've got enough time that if you're there at the beginning of it, you should be able to undertake numerous armed crossings within that movement. So yes, there will be an all green phase. For cyclists, certainly, in that time.
Right, good. Any more questions on this one?
No. Any more? Yeah. So we've done junctions. Good. So now we move to public transport, including taxis, and also other vehicles, which includes cars, vans, motorcycles, trucks, etc. And let's hope no HGVs. But anyway, we're looking at public transport, including taxis and other vehicles. Any questions or comments? Yes, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, I'm being very Pollyannish tonight. I very much approve of the relocation of the bus stops at Union Lane and the one currently outside the co-op. It seems to me, again, the team have listened to what's been said. They've been moved away from the two junctions, and given that there are now signalled safe ways for pedestrians to cross at the Highworth Road roundabout, Highworth Avenue roundabout, and at Union Lane, it should be possible to reach those two bus stops, which are well away from the junction. So I think, well done.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Could I just say from the people who had drive, not well done, because we're losing our bus stop to come back from town. And the buses are bad enough already, but just to have the bus stop disappear is a bit of a blow.
I've got to say that when back in 2012, when I first stood for council, began canvassing out in that area, that was the issue that Woodhead Drive people raised, even with the bus stop there, that the bus service was lamentable. And I just have to say here, because I've actually got a query for Mr. Gamble, I was on the B bus today, and I discovered, as I've discovered in the past, but it's stuck in my mind, that when I'm in Huntingdon, it's stopping everywhere. It goes all around the village, you know, it goes here and there, and so on. And then when it comes into Cambridge, it whips along and it stops hardly anywhere. So I'm just wondering why all those people in Huntingdon are able to use the B bus as their village bus, and yet it's not allowed to stop down coming into Cambridge when people would like it to do so.
Well said. Well said.
If you would,
because it would be even more lamentable than it was before. The fact is that it stops at those places in Huntingdon because it goes there before it gets on the track. When it gets on the track, going to be a bus rapid transit system. If it's going to be a bus rapid transit system and then stop at every stop on its way into town and queue through all the traffic that you have there and reduce the amount of priority from what was on the original proposal, then the situation would be even worse. But I've got some good news for you. We are about to do a change to the end service. I think it's around about end of July. And we're going to experiment with that, stopping at all stops on Milton Road, so it will give you a connection to Cambridge.
In everybody hear that? In service will stop along Milton Road.
Can I just announce that my complaint was the bus stop's disappearing, so unfortunately the end service won't be able to stop there. No buses will be able to.
I'm not sure it is disappearing. That bus stop is here and here. I estimate that's probably walking past about 6 houses before you get there. So there's a bus stop on either side of the road. What's that?
So where are we then?
Not Woodhead Drive. Woodhead Drive is here.
No, Downlands Lane.
Most people from Woodhead Drive come out down.
You can already
Downlands
see
Lane serves the majority of people coming from Woodhead Drive.
Downlands Lane here.
Downlands Lane's right close to it, isn't it? Well, it might,
We've got that Downlands Lane here. Again, there's 2 bus stops in easily walkable distance. So
Yeah, but you've taken away the ones just...
You've taken them on here.
This design has no less bus stops than is currently along Milton Road.
It's got the number.
All we've done is tried to pair them. I mean,
I wanted to ask a separate question.
sorry, okay. So all we've done is tried to logically pair them, so you've got one on either side of the road at these points, but we haven't not taking away any bus stops, we're just moving them along the road. I mean, what I'd say is have a look at the plans and detail at the back, it's a bit difficult to see from here. But
so what are the decisions behind moving them? Is that for traffic flow?
No, not necessarily. I mean, part of it is trying to fit in floating bus stops. That's what we've made the commitment to try and do there. So it's trying to allocate where we can do a floating bus stop. I know there's different views on floating bus stops, but that is the decision of this. There was a workshop looking at bus stop locations and where people wanted them to necessarily be located.
That's why because none of the stuff the workshop's actually been carried through from what...
That's not true. We've taken what's coming through, but obviously there's different views that come through at workshops. So particularly with that, people marking up on their plans where they want the bus stops. Your view may be different to maybe was potentially the majority view. But we have looked at that information coming forward in some of those. We've also had discussions with Andy about the bus stop locations as well. Levels is another issue in terms of where they're located. There's some big level differences coming up here. Some we've looked to locate in places which people wanted in the bus stop workshop, and then we've gone on site for it's a 1 in 7 incline. So you get off that bus, particularly for a wheelchair user, or necessarily we just wouldn't be able to put it there because the level difference is so extreme. So there's lots of other considerations we've gone to. We have really thought about where the bus stop locations are going.
Did you consider proximity to large numbers of people? Because obviously they're near the side roads. Because not many people live on Milton Road compared with the
considerations have been given to the general walking distance once you're onto Milton Road between
so
bus
you
stops.
try to increase that walking distance?
Well, some people, whenever you move the bus stop line, you're going to have some people that have to walk a bit further and some people that have to walk a bit less far.
Yeah, I'm saying that the first group of people was vastly more of those than people it's near to. Because you've moved it away from
any movements are not to the level where we don't feel they would make a huge different or deterring more from using the bus or being able to access the bus stop.
I think...
but do not look at the detailed plans. Again, this is something in consultation, but there is restraints on where we can put bus stops there. Side road, access to homes and driveways, obviously that creates a lot of difficulties of where we can locate it.
Let me just interject here. I mean, in terms of the consultation, if there is a strong view that the bus stops here need to be moved a bit closer to Downlands Lane, then to be honest, as long as it all fits within the plan and it fits within the levels and all of the things that Neil's just explained, there's not really a big problem with looking at that.
I'd emphasise that, make that view very well known in the consultation and get the people who live in and around Woodhead Drive, because I actually, when I think about that area, I do think there are more people down at Daniels Lane. But let's hear from Andy Campbell, because let's hope it's more good news. Are you going to tell us that the number 8 bus will be entirely restored? Please come forward.
Come and speak in the microphone, then everybody can hear. Andy Campbell from the stage area.
Right, no, I'm not going to tell you that. And the reason I'm not going to tell you that is because Hills Road is a nightmare and you can't predict the journey time. Right, is that better?
Yeah.
Right, and we wouldn't be reintroducing it because we couldn't get the reliability with it.
No.
And if the council stopped digging up Hills Road, then we would consider it, because this year will be the 7th year in succession where Hills Road has been dug up, the busiest corridor into the city. My question is, how many other junctions are you putting a second priority for cyclists? And can we just go back to Gilbert Road?
To answer that, Andy, it's only Gilbert Road that we've got here.
Right. What you've got to remember is, part of the design of the Greater Cambridge Partnership for this scheme was bus priority. And one was to take 70 cars off that road. What I can't understand is why the cyclists can't get off there, walk on the pavement and get on that cycle path at the other side. Why do you need to give them 5 seconds priority and stop the flow of everything else? No, but anybody who wants to do that, you've got junctions, you've got cycle paths, you've done all this for cyclists, and I understand that you're a very well organised group of people, and I congratulate you for that. But this isn't just about cyclists. And we get a lot more people move a lot quicker if you give us a little bit more priority. And I wouldn't have to come to these meetings and be abused at every opportunity.
No, we've all cheered for the number of the N bus. We all cheered. We cheered.
And as you know, I've tried to be an advocate for buses when you're not here, because someone's trying to have a voice for that, so I appreciate you more often the man who is the voice for that. Although a powerful man in the voice for that. It's a balance, as we said, again, it's a consultation. We're still seeing a bus, the priority measure opinion here do improve the journey time for buses coming through, even with this element in here. It is the only junction which we've got that section and those 5 seconds, but again, it's not set in stone.
I'll object to it.
Well, you feel free to have a response in those regards, and you can consider.
Thank you. Now, if we move on, I'll beg your pardon, I'm sorry. Yeah, no.
Okay, I'm at it again. Floating bus stops. We had the meeting about it, and I was hoping something might have changed, and it hasn't. There's a lot of people that do not feel safe using floating bus stops, and I think Stagecoach have got the same opinion as well. They don't like them either. There's a problem if the cyclist doesn't stop, the disabled person or elderly person can't get over to get to this floating bus stop before the bus goes away. They're just a terrible design.
On this particular point,
I've actually seen the floating bus stop, which works. It's in Camden Road in London, but you could get Milton Road into Camden Road twice.
Yeah.
The problem here is Cambridge has narrow roads, and the floating bus stop needs to have space, and we just haven't got the space for them.
Is that
So
already
just
one
stop
on
wasting your time.
Any comment about floating bus stops or the legal consultations? I think we did have as Jerry says, we had an extra meeting about the bus stops and about modifications to floating bus stops in efforts to make them safer. But I think really we need to leave it to the consultation and people make their views.
Did we do remember I said about having a push button?
Yeah, so the issue is how pedestrians cross from the footpath and get to the floating bus stop. And some of the ideas that we discussed at the meeting were taken away, and we will consider those ideas. And one that Dorcas mentioned earlier was having the lights that was in relation to the crossings here, which are pretty much just similar things. Yeah, how do we actually get pedestrians from the footpath to the waiting location? And these are quite difficult questions to answer. The floating bus stop is kind of the natural type of bus stop to have in a scheme like this, where we've got this segregation of the cycleway by trees from the carriageway. So, kind of the nature of the concept design that we have leads us to a floating bus stop. The question is, how do we then make it safe? How do we ensure that pedestrians don't get knocked over by cyclists? One thing that I would say is that floating bus stops are in operation in Cambridge, and the County Council have done analysis to check their safety and make sure they're performing safely. And the analysis from that study is quite positive, and it shows that the interaction between pedestrians and cyclists works quite well. Whether that can be improved or not is a matter for us to look into, because obviously we're proposing quite a few floating bus stops along this scheme. So it's one that we're committed to do.
Please can you make sure you get in touch with Campsite then, because I had a meeting with Campsite and they said they haven't had any consultation about floating bus stops. So that's a really important thing.
Do we take that there will be communication? Yes. Now we move on to landscaping and environment and parking. So does anybody have questions, comments, etc. about landscape and environment and parking? Yes, up the back there.
Hi, just two questions. I don't know if it's landscaping or not, but any chance of incorporating suds drainage into landscaping?
Drainage into landscape.
Because it's a fantastic Cambridge City Council document that Simon London on the development with landscaping as part of a kind of. If you go to Camborne, they've done lots of fantastic stuff with drainage. I'm just wondering if that's going to be incorporated. And then the second question on landscaping is, it's a very small thing, but if you are having a floating around bus stops, I don't know whether anybody's taken a look at Hills Road. One of the things that's actually been very popular on floating around bus stops is the small bit of landscaping. It's easy to do, simple, doesn't need much maintenance, but it does make the road look a lot greener.
A parking question. The couple of us here from Herbert Street tonight, which is, as you probably know, was part of a proposed residence area on the south side of Milton Road. That whole block on the south side of Milton Road is very short of parking. The proposed schemes would take about 40 spaces out of that, so make it very much worse, to the point where it's not viable for residents to park cars anywhere near their homes. That has been stopped for the time being, but our concern is that the interaction between this scheme, which takes out spaces on Milton Road, down towards between Mitcham's Corner and some of the Herbert Street area, even those are all coming out before any arrangements have been made for the adjacent residence streets to get some solutions. And I think the worst concern is that areas to the north side of Milton Road are being allowed to proceed with residence schemes, which further kind of concentrate commuter parking and other tidal parking into the area on the south side of Milton Road. So I suppose our question, Caroline, feel free to add if you want me to clarify further, but if you want to clarify further, is there anything you can do to try and coordinate the changes in parking? Because we are just at a state at the moment where the residents can just about cope, and we can see that in 6 months or a year it will be impossible, and it will have become almost impossible to get a residency on the south side.
Well, all I can say is that when I was the county councillor for West Chesterton, I bore this really clearly in mind, and that's why I endeavoured to get a scheme that would actually include your area in the area across the other side of the road. But the boundary changes for the county council mean that I have no longer any role in that part of the area, so that you'll have to actually raise it really with Councillor Manning.
We are already doing that.
You know, because I'm afraid that we have to proceed with the Asham part, because the residents there, the county council's role is this on resident parking, if I can say this really quickly. If people from an area within the county council's purview start raising issues about residents parking, then there's a responsibility to do an informal consultation, which in fact I actually did do and made sure was done. And if a large number, more than 50% say are saying that they want it, then the responsibility of the county councillor is to go to the county council offices and to so advise them. And then we move on into another process where there's another consultation done, which we've just done on Asham Road and also on the Asham and Victoria, and we had them here at the school, for residents then to think about whether they really want to move into a residents-only parking scheme. And so I can't tell the residents there that you've got to wait for residents somewhere else, because my role and my responsibility is for Asham, and that's where I have to take my direction from.
To come back on that, I think actually we need you guys to work together, not be in competition with each other.
I'm not in competition with anybody.
But what's happened over the years is that successive areas where parking problems were relatively light have been allowed to get residence areas concentrating the problem more and more, until in the end we're going to end up with an area where it's impossible to implement a residence scheme that would actually do anything, that would be workable, because the successive areas kind of are being picked off. It's almost inverse triage, where the areas that haven't got bad problems that can be solved are being allowed to be solved, concentrating the problem worse and worse into the middle.
No, I understand. All I can say is that the people in Asham have actually asked for me to tell the county councillor that they would like to proceed to see whether more than 50% want it. Now, Paul wants to say something, and then I see two hands, so we have Paul.
So, as you just heard, it's actually quite difficult to coordinate the residents parking. And I'm aware that what we're doing on Milton Road is actually taking away parking spaces that are currently kind of on the verge of the car landscape verge. So I do have a project officer who's actually looking at the parking issues and trying to pull everything together, working with the parking team at the county council to find out exactly what's happening and what mitigations need to happen before the losses of the spaces, at least on Milton Road. In terms of the resident parking zones, obviously, you know, the issues that Jocelyn has mentioned are there, but we're also trying to look at those and find out exactly, you know, what impact they also have.
Look, Jocelyn, can I just quickly say on the residents know that I'll be trying to find solutions. I think the thing we need to do is, at some point, this scheme, in whatever form, we're going to know roughly when it's going to be implemented. I think that's going to be a point in the timescale where I might have to go to you and say, well, you've got this unpalatable option, and we have to make a decision because we know this is coming. Paul, I'd like to know if that offer isn't Sonia or Nicola, I'd like to know who it is, because I want to I'll talk to you. Oh, it's Nicola, right? Okay, fine.
Right, yes, Anne, and then, there's two people up the back there, so perhaps we can have Anne, then one, then two. Yeah.
Okay, I'm focusing on landscape and environment here and the impact on the streets off Milton Road. I'm specifically asking this on behalf of some people I know in Chesney Hall Crescent who are concerned about whether the changes that will happen along Milton Road concerning landscaping will affect the planted area at the top of Chesney Hall Crescent. There's a really large mature tree and a lot of shrubbery.
You'd be opposite the light.
Yes, opposite the light.
No, we have the option to do something there, but we don't. It's kind of out of Milton Road.
That's good. That's all. If
the general consensus is left as it is, then I'm happy to leave it as it is. We
Good.
Possibly tidy up the wall, or I don't know, the landscape architect got a few ideas for what we can do to make it nicer, but
Yeah.
that would be an object of discussion. We didn't answer Linda's question earlier. In terms of studs and landscaping, yes, you asked.
Okay, so yes, we are looking at using such drainage within the scheme, and I guess that's something. So it's stable urban drainage design. It's basically using how you can use rainwater, capture it, and use it to within the planting scheme to improve your drainage. So if you've obviously got plants taking some of that water, it means that there's less needs to go through the drainage system. Or it might hold that water to release it gradually rather than flooding through the system. The issue with when you're looking to use water that's been on the road, say into the trees, etc., is obviously it picks up chemicals from petrol and rubber bits, and so there's an issue that water gets polluted. So it's not. We could be using that water, but we have to it has to be some filtration system before it gets to the tree, for example, so it doesn't damage the tree in doing that. But it's certainly something that's being looked at. In terms of the small areas of landscaping, actually talking with the landscape architects team, those are the troublesome areas in maintenance terms, in terms of often those do get overlooked and they become overgrown. We'd rather try and keep it into, which is why we said less than 1.5 metres. Generally, we'd look to do hard hardscaping around the trees and etc.
But Wendy, if the bus stop area's been done on Hills Road already, then it's possible that we could look at following that example. I mean, it's something that we need to discuss further in the detailed design, but I'm hoping to have those discussions. But as Neil said, it will come down. There will be some aspects that come down to maintenance.
Just one thought on that. It's just on the maintenance side, and it just worth bearing in mind the landscaping. There's a huge current trend now for kind of what they call rewilding, which is actually making sort of landscaping design which is kind of natural as opposed to very maintained. So if you have meadow type planting, or you do something that actually is very good for biodiversity, but also doesn't require a huge amount of maintenance. Then you build in.
Well, I mean, that's certainly not off the table. I mean, if there's something that kind of self-maintains itself, I'm sure everyone will be signed into that. There's examples elsewhere. I guess subs is still the intention to be using subs in some form along this section of the road, along the Milton Road.
Now it's 5 to 9, and there are 2 hands there and a hand here. So are they all on landscaping?
No, one's on parking.
Who's on parking then? Right.
I want to talk about
parking. Well, let's have the one on landscaping first. If there's anybody that had their hand up there on landscaping, no. So it's all on parking there. So we have the 3, 1, 2, 3 on parking.
So I wanted to ask how the zones are thought up, because you say that you're responding to the residents, but they're also residents in a different zone. But we didn't create our zone. The zones have been created, and they've been created in a way that has produced a huge disparity of density of housing, and also a disparity between the houses that have got off-street parking options. So, for instance, the Ashton Road one had loads of off-street parking options, whereas you're stuck down in the zone that's now called Elizabeth. Very few houses have got off-street parking options, and even when you come to the detail of it, something like Milton Road, where there's a boundary, south side of Milton Road has been landed into the Elizabeth side, and that includes loads of houses that don't have off-street parking. There's the north side, which has all got huge driveways, is in Ashton Road. And I can't understand how you can allow something like this to happen when we're all in households. I've been in mine for 30 years, and with moving the parking from Milton Road and then leaving us squashed where we used to park in Milton Road when we needed to overspill, I don't know what you expect us to be able to do. It's completely crazy and completely nonsensical. The other thing I was wondering about is what the responsibility is of anyone if they do suddenly move 40 spaces on Milton Road, which we've been used to parking in there any sort of rights that we had to say, well, we bought these houses, we've been living in them, we've been parking on this street, and suddenly the spaces are moving. Are there any ways you can creatively look at providing alternative spaces for us, so that we can have some spaces, even if it means having a little bit less landscaping? And I know you're trying to discourage cars and commuters coming into town, but we're sort of living in town, and obviously we look at whether we can manage without a car, but not all of us can.
Right. Up the second person, yes.
Yes, I was a similar point. You're going to displace a huge amount of parking from houses on Milton Road. There are many people who don't have off-street parking. I have great sympathy with our colleagues, our neighbours in places like Herbert Street, who are already very squeezed. It's not going to be feasible for those cars to be moved into side streets. And I frankly find it quite extraordinary that you're coming at this stage in the design and telling us that you've got some people looking into it and you can't provide us with any sorts of solutions, but it's why you have displaced parking. Where on earth are these cars going to go?
Right, and then here.
Mine had to do with people living on Milton Road who want to get their properties enhanced, builders' trucks and so on and so forth. Will there be certain times of day when they'll be allowed to have builders' vehicles and vans and so on parked outside their properties, property maintenance?
I'll just answer the question about the zones. There was a question asked about the zones, so I'll respond to that and then hand over in terms of the general. I have to tell you that I worked awfully hard with residents, doing consultation and so on, and I know that Councillor Tunnicliffe, if he's still here, he is. Councillor Tunnicliffe worked very hard in terms of informal consultations, and the zones are worked out on the basis that there have to be defined areas, and the Elizabeth one is Milton Road. It was originally Chesterton Road, Elizabeth Way, and Milton Road, but included in that what's now Asham and the Hurst Park. And it did appear from the consultations that we both did. Councillor Tunnicliffe was concentrating on the Herbert Street area, and we did too. And Asham, that's where I generally looked. And then with Hurst Park, we looked together with Hurst Park Residents Association. Now, what I could see the problem with Herbert Street, yes, that's why I tried to get it into an area that would enable everybody to have a possibility. But when the boundaries change, I am afraid I have no more control. And it's not that I'm in competition with anybody or anybody's in competition, but it's just that we had to proceed with Ashram because they wanted to proceed and to talk about it, to make a final decision. And I had no role in enabling Elizabeth because the decision was made by my fellow councillor, Councillor Manning, that he wanted to proceed in a different way. And he must have been doing that in accordance with what his residents said. But can I just pass over the court, because the bigger issue about what's happening on Milton Road is really an issue for the Grand Planning Partnership.
Yeah, in terms of why we're looking at this now, it's partly because we don't have a clear view of how all of this residents' parking is going to turn out. We don't know if the residents are going to go for the various schemes that they've been doing or not. So it's kind of a moving thing that we're having to deal with. One thing that we've done specifically on Milton Road is we've done a drop curb survey. We've mentioned it before, and what we're looking at specifically is the properties on Milton Road that don't have a driveway access, and we're looking at first mitigating for those. There's obviously the other issue of some of the residents of side streets who also make use of the parking space on Milton Road, and that kind of needs more thought. It depends on what happens with the resident parking zone, so that's why we're still looking at this issue.
So how precisely do you intend mitigating, as you say, those people who don't have off-street parking?
I can't say that.
So you don't have a clue.
I don't understand.
And a new residence parking scheme on side streets will make it even worse for those people.
We're taking away, there'll be a removal of the water space on Milton Road.
Yeah, you're removing a great number of parking spaces from people who don't have any other option, and new residence parking schemes are going to make the alternatives non-viable.
At the very least, you need to look at merging the areas so that they can be pooling. Some areas have excess capacity, some don't have enough.
I think Paul, that's kind of out of our control, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just worth to say, I'll happily come and talk to you about it afterwards, but it's not really Paul's remit, is the project manager for this. I'm trying to find some solutions for those areas because of how the constraints work. I don't really want to get into a sort of pointless bicker about this, but at the end of the day, I decided I wanted all the areas to not go ahead. Jocelyn chose, for I'm sure very good reasons in her mind to go ahead with the Ashton Road. I would much prefer that we tried to sort of pause all of them and rework it in a way that the executives could all. Unfortunately, we couldn't get an agreement about that. But I'll happily come and talk to you about the details. I'm waiting on a couple of legal queries, basically, which some residents are aware of, to try and mitigate the impact of the number of spaces we would lose in Herbert Street if we applied the scheme as it is at the moment. Because the issue, when I took over the county council for that area, I found out that although there had been consultations about whether people wanted residence parking, no one had explained to the residents quite what that meant, and that meant that you would lose a lot of parking. Ironically, the way the regulations work. But I'll come and talk to you afterwards.
Well, we need seriously to.
All I can say is that I tried very, very hard.
Can you be a little less efficient and hold back on the Ashton Road one? Because
it's not up to
me.
me.
With the geographic
Sorry,
choice on Milton Road.
sorry, it's not up to me. It's up to the residents.
But in the county council meeting, where you discussed the schedule and how you were going to proceed with introducing residence parking throughout the city, they prioritised certain areas, and Herbert's, the Elizabeth
Yes, it's off topic,
was
sorry.
a priority,
Yes.
well before the others. And you can deal with Elizabeth before the others.
Yes, sorry to interrupt, but we are off topic. We've got to conclude. But the thing is that you will have to take that up with your county councillor, and as I have emphasised, I tried very, 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 very hard. And that is all I can say. And that I had to operate in accordance with the residents for whom I am responsible, and that is what I've done. I've done my job as a county councillor, and I'm sorry, but I did try very hard in terms of what's now Elizabeth and in terms of what's now the Hurst Park Estate. But let's move on, because it seems to me that we have come to the conclusion of the evening. And what I would like to say is thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank you to the officers, and thank you to everybody who's participated, whether it's by asking questions or making comments or simply to being here and therefore listening to what the interactions are, so that we're all so that we are all better equipped to respond when the consultation begins. And the project in terms of next step are that this concept will go to the Joint Assembly, it will then go to the Executive Board, and if it's approved by the Executive Board, taking into account what the Assembly has said, then it will come out to consultation when everyone here and in the area will have an opportunity to make comment, to criticise, to applaud, to put forward other suggestions, or to add to what's there or detract from it. And then the final preferred option design will be drawn up in accordance with what's come out of the consultation. So I'll just hand over to Paul for any final remarks that he has.
Okay, and it's just thank you all for coming. And it is actually really useful for me as project manager to have this engagement with the local, with the public, especially on a scheme, both scheme, Milton and Histon Road. I actually find it really useful. So thanks for coming to these events, and thanks for all the questions and the comments. Obviously, we have a difficult task. We have to make compromises. There's compromises all through the scheme. We have to balance things out. It's a difficult job, but having you all here to talk to, and I'll talk to some of you outside of these meetings as well, is actually really useful for me, so thank you.
And what I also want to add is that we did a wonderful excursion, some of us, about the trees, and we'll have another opportunity to have an excursion up the road with Neil, other officers, and the landscape architect, so that we can all look at the road and see how it might be, the landscaping might fit in.
So my plan with the landscaping is actually first I kind of have a landscape architect who's walked the road with me and is going to come up with a few designs, but I'm not sure if he's actually sticking around. So if he does, good. If he doesn't, I'll have to commission another landscape architect to walk up the road and come up with some designs. So I want to have something that's actually on paper so that I can discuss it with you. And one of the areas that I am actually quite concerned about is the area outside Aldi Road shops. So I want to get a proper design done for that area so that I can actually show it to the shop owners and discuss it with some of the local people.
Thank you very much. I see there are other hands up, but there's a chance to talk to Paul and Neil afterwards. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
So I've just been to the meeting. One thing I've noticed coming out is I think I've come out just at the time when the trucks that are being diverted off the A14 are now going up and down Milton Road. So things like that container carrying lorry behind me there. And that's obviously been a recent problem. It's hopefully a temporary problem as the works on the A14 are done. Here's another container lorry going past behind me now. Anyway, at the meeting, I think there were two newsworthy points. One was that the chief executive, or the managing director as he calls himself, of Stagecoast East, Andy Campbell, announced that the M service is in the future going to stop at all stops along Milton Road. So that'll give an improved service for people who live along and near Milton Road to be able to get in and out of the city of Cambridge, which is that was received with applause and cheers from the public at the meeting. So that was a very popular statement. The other thing I thought was particularly notable and newsworthy was Councillor Scutt saying that cyclists should get off and walk if junctions aren't up to standard. So she particularly referred to the dangerous double roundabout on Trumpington Road in Cambridge, but she was also commenting on proposals or the plans in relation to the Milton Road junction with, I think it's Westbrook Place, the road that accesses the Westbrook Centre and the new homes off there. That's near the city end of Milton Road. It's another one of those container lorries which are now going up and down Milton Road as the A14 is presumably closed or about to close. I was particularly disappointed that we didn't hear from many of our councillors, including some new councillors there tonight. We didn't hear much at all from councillors on the plans. Apart from Councillor Scutt, we didn't really get significant contributions from councillors. Councillor Price was lurking in the public seating. He came up to make some comments on how verge parking has been regulated in King's Hedges because the consultants didn't seem to know about how verge parking has been regulated in Cambridge. And Councillor Bird spoke in opposition to floating bus stops and asked for some clarification on how the Union Lane Milton Road junction will be designed. But overall, we didn't hear much from councillors at all, so I don't get an impression of what councillors' views are on the plans. We did obtain some more details on what's proposed. I was asking for information on, for example, if this traffic lights are put in on this roundabout, how much would it slow down the traffic? The consultants were very keen not to release that information, although the project manager from the Greater Cambridge Partnership said we could have some information but not all the technical detail. I think we need the detail in order to be able to assess what's proposed. We need to know how the throughput will be affected on this junction and how it will affect traffic queues. We have been told that the plans will reduce the capacity of this junction. I asked for the information to be presented on the safety and on that, and what I'd like to see is information on both this, the option of keeping the roundabout and putting traffic lights on it, which they're proposing, and the alternative of doing basically a traffic light controlled crossroads, which would potentially give cyclists and pedestrians options to cross more safely, and I don't know what impact it would have on throughput, and I'd like to see the potential impact of the various options. We were essentially told to trust the experts at the meeting tonight. Well, if the experts have got confidence in what they've come up with, they shouldn't be shy about providing the information behind their reasoning. So, I don't think we really got much further forward. The other piece of information we found out was through questioning by Edward Lee and others that there is a proposal to have an always green cycle and pedestrian crossing at every junction. Not this junction, because this junction just a roundabout with lights on it, but the Gilbert Road junction, the Arbury Road Union Lane junction and the King's Hedges Road junction will all have that scramble phase, as it's sometimes called, the always green for pedestrians and cyclists. And we were told that the one at the King's Hedges Road junction will have enough time to let at least cyclists cross two arms of the junction. And that's the kind of detail which I've been calling for in the plans and actually in the consultation package. We haven't got the detail on the how the traffic lights would be arranged. That's not been part of what's been published, and I've been calling now for, well, ever since the plans were published, about just over a week I think, for that level of detail. Some of it was extracted at the meeting tonight, but very little of it. There's a lot more which needs to be drawn out. We found out that they don't yet have the detailed planting plans for trees. A planting plan for shrubs was mentioned, it was raised by a member of the public, but again, I'd like to see those in the consultation document so that people can make an informed response to the consultation. I'll be trying to lobby the Greater Cambridge Partnership to see if I can get this consultation to be as informative as possible. I want people to be able to make informed responses to it so that, that it's actually a useful exercise. Anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there for this evening and do some shopping and go home. The other thing I might do on my way home is take some pictures of these trucks that are coming through. Here we have another one, so clearly the A14 is closed or closing at the moment, so now we have these large container lorries going down Milton Road.